How are you, dude? What's going on?
I'm good. I'm good. Not much. Just in the middle of the press world, but I don't. Uh, it's funny how you sort of retrain your brain on how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm okay. And all the everything I've done today has been really lovely. So now it's
Mm,
on you to continue that. You know,
Okay. Thank you. That's a lot of pressure, but I feel like I can hold up my end of the bargain.
I like your shirt, by the way. You big
Thank you,
film
dude.
guy?
Yeah, I follow you on Letterboxd and I see some of your like
Oh,
film reviews and stuff. So I was like, I feel like I'll put on the bootleg for Jeremy. He'll appreciate that.
I do appreciate it. You'll have to let me know what your username is so I can follow you back.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Man, I think it's interesting to hear you say that you're feeling relaxed and you're kind of just chilling because you're a busy guy. You got lots of stuff going on. You've got the band, you've got the label, you've got your own podcast. Like, I feel like you're doing lots and lots of stuff. How are you finding it in terms of juggling all of those different aspects of your life? I feel like you've got a lot of things going on.
Loaded question, my friend. Because also on top of that, I took a part-time job, so I'm working at a record store pricing records as well, 3 days a week. So
Wow, dude,
um,
crazy.
I'm realizing more and more that I am my father, and my father is someone who was a workaholic and used that as a way to banish how he really feels about life, and
Right.
like used work as a way to cope, basically, or like
Yeah.
to just fill time, so you don't allow yourself the time to sit on the couch and really dwell on things because
Yeah.
there's a million things on fire at all times.
Yeah.
So
Sublimating life through labor. I love it.
you said it well. So that's exactly what it is. Yeah, like I have felt it kick the shit out of me in the last 3 months.
Mm,
Like, I don't know. I'm assuming this is like a step in the right direction towards healing where I'm going, oh, this is a problem. I need to figure this out. So um I'm aware of it. Have I
yeah.
done anything to help it yet? Absolutely not. But I'm aware of it. And that's the first step, right? Admitting
Yeah.
that there's a problem.
That's exactly right. We like reflection. We like self awareness.
Not giving any answers. We're nobody's business. We're nobody's now. All you get is this performance. We're all performing anyhow. Is it enough to call it off and lick our wounds and put us into past tense? Is it enough?
Was showing my wife a just like a silly little like Instagram meme thing that popped up last night, but it kind of like shook me to my core. And it was just like one of those little like pithy affirmation things. And it was like being an adult is just saying in the next few weeks, things will start to calm down over and over and over again until you die. And I was like, fuck.
Uh-huh. Yeah. You might have the one day in there where things do seem a little calm and you're like, is this it? Is this
Yep.
the day? Is
Is
this the
this the eye
one?
of the storm? Am I in it?
Ex- right, totally. Like actually yesterday I woke up and I was like, wait a minute, I don't have anything on the books today. And it felt so comforting.
Mm,
But then I don't know if you deal with this. I have a problem to where if I don't do something to move towards a dollar every single day, I am freaking out. And I know that's capitalism
mhm.
ruining my life,
Yep.
right? But I can't get through a day without doing something that is going to benefit me down the line. Whether it's like, hey, I placed this order for this thing that I'm eventually going to do, or like, hey, I scheduled an interview for something that's in 2 weeks, or whatever it is, like for the podcast, or like, hey, I responded to that email that I had been putting off doing, but it's
Yep.
gonna turn into something down the line. If I don't do something like that, I can't be the person that sits on the couch and like binge watches a TV show. Like I'll do it, but then I'll fucking hate myself later. Where I'm like, why did I let myself do that? So
Yeah, I
that's a
I can
that's a
I can
problem.
definitely relate. I am constantly like trying to grind away at, my own podcast, my writing, various projects that I've had on the go. If I allow myself the space to be lazy and to kind of just not do anything, which is its own kind of thing. You know, you have to kind of be present in doing nothing. Um, it's tough. I recently turned 36 on Sunday, and my wife was like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Absolutely nothing." It's like, let's do nothing. Let's make it an active pursuit to do nothing today. And we sat on the couch, we binge watched a TV show. I was patting my dog, hanging out, and it was glorious. But can I do that every week? Absolutely not.
Right. Happy belated, by the way.
Thank you. I wasn't looking for the plug, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
And that's awesome you pulled it off.
Yeah. I mean, you got to do it. You got to give it a go. And I mean, for someone like you who is, you know, exponentially more busy than I am, I think that's a noble thing to kind of recognize that like you are going to be, you know, put your nose to the grindstone all the time. So sometimes you just got to like just find that space where you can and enjoy it while you've got it.
What I suffer with the most is not noticing wins, right?
Mm.
Like you work so hard at something and you don't allow yourself the space to sort of be like, hey, that went well,
Mm.
you know, because you're constantly chasing having to do something else.
Yes.
That is something else that I'm trying to be better about. Has it happened yet? No. But it's the pursuit, my friend.
That's right. It's the journey. It's the progress that you're
The journey.
doing.
It's the, yeah, exactly.
This is where we do the podcast to pivot into the subject of our conversation today. So if we're talking about wins, you know, you have a new record coming out. I've listened to it. It's fantastic. So there's a
Thank
win
you.
right there. This new record, which is the band's sixth, is following the previous record, Lament, in 2020, which was, I would argue, your most celebrated record. Got very, very, you know, loving reviews. It was a fan favorite, probably the most popular record in the band's career. So, you know, that's its own separate win that we can talk about. But what's your feeling in terms of trying to follow up something that was so well received? I'm sure there's some anxiety and pressure that goes into that thought process.
It's funny. I'm so pessimistic always, which I'm, again, added to the list.
Yeah.
As soon as you said that, my gut reaction was to be like, I don't think it's our most popular. Like I immediately tried to tear it down.
Yeah.
Which sucks, you know, like, because I'm all, you know, there's something that I have said this before, but like a thing that I very much value is that like with our listener base, it's like I love to watch people fight about ranking our records, you know, because there's the people who like think our last one was our worst record. There's people who think our first record was our worst record, and there's of course the people who think that's our best record. So anyway, what I'm trying to be better about is saying it's none of my business, right? Like it's none of my business how people receive this or whatever. And with that, it's none of my business. I try not to put an added pressure to sort of do better, etc., on whatever we do next. I haven't honestly felt the pressure to create something thinking about how it will, if it's going to be better than since our third record. It Survived By for me was the hardest record to write in that sort of sense. And when I listen to that record or when I think about that record, it is clear as day to me that I was losing my mind and like really suffering from that because what I realize I do, and I did it to an extent a little bit on this new record, is that when I feel some sort of like anxiety at all when it comes to writing, my way of dealing with it is I overwrite and I fill so much goddamn space. And so that's why I feel like as soon as you hit play on Is Survived By, there's like my brain wants to say that there's 3 minutes of that entire record maybe where I'm not yelling. Yeah. It's just like it's just fucking consistent the entire time. And that to me is a reflection of anxiety. Yeah. I am very busy on this new record. Extremely busy on this new record.
Yes, you are.
But the moments where I'm not are some of my favorite moments in the band's recorded history. So like I'm at least happy that like the moments that I'm not filling space, what is happening in my stead is is stuff that I'm like, I can't believe is us, you know? So
Yeah.
that's something I'm pretty proud of.
When you don't know what to say, when everyone wants it, and you want the subject to change, 'cause I've been swallowed up, and I've been split in two, and I'm not sure which is me and who I respond through. So notify my next of kin, and let them know there's so much more to believe in.
Yeah, I think you should. And having listened to the record, I think those moments of, I don't know, space kind of act as almost like a decompression from the intensity and the ferocity of the stuff where you really are just yelling and going for it. And
Yeah.
that kind of adds to the dynamic contrast of the band, which has always been kind of one of the band's best qualities, in my opinion, is the ability to have the speed and the ferocity, but then to also, you know, let that space in and stop and let things kind of sit and let people kind of collect themselves before moving on to the next thing. Um, you know, some of my favorite tracks on the record are moments like Altitude, which has, you know, just like lots of space and texture and things going on that aren't necessarily, you know, five guys playing the hardest they possibly can. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point. I wanted to kind of touch on the theme of the record because
Mhm.
I've always enjoyed your work as a lyricist
Thank you.
for you're welcome, for making me kind of interrogate my own thoughts on someone else's art, which I think is like the thing that art should do. It should provoke you in some way and have some kind of, you know, emotional investment and thought around it. Um, the title of the record, you know, Spiral in a Straight Line, is a clear kind of oxymoron to me. And I wanted to kind of ask you, like, where did the title come from? I know it's like a lyrical line on the record as well, but what are you trying to say with the theme of that record?
In the song Altitude, which you just mentioned, and I appreciate
Mhm.
what you said about that. That for me definitely was a song where, like, as we were tracking it specifically and adding more and more layers to it, you know, the Ionic Geeka, who's the vocalist who's doing that harmony behind it, like all
Yeah,
sorts of stuff to it, to where like
gorgeous.
when we started getting the mix of it, I was at there's certain times, specifically with the Ross records, Lament, and now this one, there's certain songs where when I'm listening to them, I'm like, this is the kind of sound that I always thought was like an impossibility for a band like us because we're
Mm,
just so bare bones, just guitars, bass, drums, me yelling. But Ross is able to kind of build those sonic sounds and like add whether it's keyboard or whatever it is, like
yeah.
these haunting layers that I'm just like, that's crazy. That's us
Mm,
in this, you know. So like anyway, that's a prime example. To get to your question though, so I had that was the first song that I wrote lyrics to for the record. I wrote the lyric "Spiral in a Straight Line." I played it for some friends, and they all kind of clocked that line, and it made me realize like that this is hitting people who hear it in different ways, and it's got this kind of um, I don't know, it's standing out. And it's kind of making you think about what that could mean. So I
yeah.
brought it to Nick, my guitar player, who we early on start collaborating when it comes to sort of the visuals for the record. And I was like, I'm thinking about maybe having this be an album title, and he got really excited. He was like, I see that. He's like, I think of that. I think of that line, and my brain starts moving in different directions. Like,
Mm,
what is you know between like spirals, cycles, repetition, all these sorts of things. So we start bouncing stuff off of each other, and then that sort of influences decisions going on
yeah.
throughout the record. Repeating myself, repeating phrases. Uh, like in mezzanine, for example, where I say like we're tangled up and it's we're spun around, or in the glue where I say what is it? All this right away. Anyway,
No, that's okay.
yeah, I say around and around and around and
Yeah,
around. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. Of course, yes.
like those sorts of like I've never been the kind of lyricist that like repeats phrases, repeats lines, and things like that. But that started becoming like in my head to be like there are these things that signal to circles, to spirals, to things like that, to repetition that will sort of correlate with what I'm doing here. And the theme of the record overall is sort of this idea that is this universal thing that I'm certainly not unique in having, is that so many of us wake up every single day with some sort of dread and anxiety and stress, and we are all trying to figure it out, and because we have something to do that day. We got to wake up, we have a job to do, we have someone we need to show up for, we have like some goal in mind that we have to get through, and
Yeah.
so many of us are not dealing with what is making us freak out because we don't have the time for it. We don't have the capability to understand it. So we are just having to sort of, walk a straight line or whatever it is to stay steady footed and moving forward, even though we're all sort of, losing our mind in the process and spiraling.
Yeah. I think I definitely took it to be that kind of meaning, and kind of the thing that I kind of latched onto was like, you see it more and more often in like cultural discussion and social discussion about like people getting caught in like a doom spiral, that like all of the negativity and the things in the world that are so big that they kind of dwarf the individual, yet they still affect you at the individual level. And there's these externalities that you can't control. So you get caught in this doom spiral of constantly reflecting on those things because they are very present in your life, but you can't really do anything to change them. And where the title comes in is kind of, spiraling, but in a straight line. There is still momentum to your life. Time marches on. You have to get up and do the next day after the next one. So
Exactly.
trying to reconcile that, the kind of dissonance that kind of provokes in the mind, is a difficult thing. I wanted to kind of ask you, now that the record is done, now that it's about to be out for people to listen to, have you taken any, I guess, kind of like learnings or any kind of growth from that process to kind of think about how you might counteract that spiral to kind of lift yourself up out of that particular pocket of anxiety or kind of trepidation?
I mean, it's a very thoughtful question, and I wish I had a thoughtful answer, but my God, have I not done a single thing to help it? Usually singing, usually making the songs and expressing these things is my way of helping and is my
Yeah.
way of dealing with it. At least it's making me consider things a lot more presently. And I will say, even when it came to tracking the songs, like, being in the studio and tracking them, a big part of Ross's process is reading the lyrics out loud, going line by line, talking about very in depth, in extreme depth about what every decision and song is about. And in doing so, still, when it comes time to actually finally start tracking the song, I'm still discovering what I was trying to get across, which is interesting. Like,
Yeah.
there's plenty of times where I write lyrics and I feel like I connect to what I'm saying, and I find reasoning for what I'm saying and whatever else. But it's not until like I'm starting to perform the songs or whatever else that they do really reveal what maybe I was trying to say or
Right.
trying to get out, I'm in debt to that process because it does still help me learn about process when it comes to whatever it is that I might be going through or trying to make sense of whatever it is I'm going through,
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think, as a fan and someone who's, listened to the record, if I had to kind of answer my own question, which is the podcast a faux pas, I know, but I feel like if altitude and the line of like spiral in a straight line is like the thesis of the record, the counterpoint, the counter thesis, for me comes about with force of habit. And you talk about this act of what it takes to switch gears, to really kind of get yourself out of whatever habitual process you're kind of grinding against. And the main takeaway there is your lyric about, it takes patience to break it. And this kind of comes back to what we were talking about with the sound of the record, which is like allowing space into something, allowing yourself to kind of just sit and be present and process things before taking that next step, because often we get too impulsive and maybe jump in headfirst into things that aren't really well thought out. And life is a crazy fucking thing. So sometimes just sitting and dealing with it is kind of the thing that you need to do. So that would be my own reading, but I'm interested to know what you think.
No, I think that's very well said. Absolutely. And for me, I mean, so a little bit of fun backstory on that song is like when I was going through the process of reading those lyrics out loud,
Mm.
I talk about how, because that's a song that is zero sugarcoating. Like I am, what I'm saying is clear as day.
Yeah.
There's nothing that makes the listener be like, wonder what he's talking about when he's saying that he doesn't put a seatbelt on for the first 90 seconds or whatever it is.
Yeah. Jeremy's being so abstract.
Yeah, he's so abstract. It's like, no, it's truthfully a problem. And I got that definitely from my father, who is like the one who has, I've never met a man who's had more seatbelt tickets. People like, they actually write seatbelt tickets? I'm like, yes. And my father has so many.
My father used to get lots of seatbelt tickets, so I can relate.
Okay, we have that in common.
Yep.
But I remember there was a point where I was reading that lyric and Ross was like, show of hands for everybody who would really appreciate if Jeremy started wearing his seatbelt like right away. And everyone raised their hands. And I was just like, all right. And I was really good about it for like the first month after that. But even today, I like got in the car and started driving. And pulling out of my apartment complex is like the most dangerous blind spot to my left. And that every day I'm like, I should really have this on before I make this left turn.
Yeah.
But you are right in your in your assessment that patience really is a lot of it. I mean, even in the lyric for Altitude that reflects on the title, which is I spiral in a straight line like some clever reaction. I didn't know how to feel. Was I impressed that it happened? I'm still taking the piss out of myself because what I'm saying is basically like I spiral in a straight line like some clever reaction, meaning like, oh, look how fucking clever you think you are. That like even when you're freaking out, you have to be like, clever about it, which is
so eloquent in your neuroses, Jeremy.
Exactly, 1000%. That's what I'm making. I'm like kicking myself while I'm down with that lyric, and I just think it's like a full reflection of like what I'm trying to get across to, where it's like, does being intellectually interesting, is that more effective in the long run than actually taking care of myself? Like how I'm presenting myself, is that to my benefit more than actually taking care of myself, which is like,
I feel like I'm in therapy right now. Jesus.
I know. I did a record, doing 2 records with Ross will really make you fucking do this shit.
I find motive in everything that's as bad as it sounds. It's why I can't take a compliment without turning it around to even it out. Send me up, send me away. I'll take some time, recalibrate. I'll try anything.
If we touch on the sound of the record, I was looking at the band's Spotify because one of the things that I appreciate about the last few records is that you've been putting out these playlists in advance of like things that you guys are like listening to and influenced by for each record. And as like a music nerd, I love that shit. I obsess over that. That's one of the reasons why I do this podcast, to talk to musicians about the music that they love. The playlist for this record is super interesting to me because it swings from like Hope's Fall, which is one of my favorite bands of all time, to like Ethel Cain, to Fontaine's DC, to ZZ Top and Duran Duran. So like,
right, yeah,
running the gamut of a whole bunch of different stuff. So for you personally, what are some of the touchstones that you were listening to or influenced by for the new record?
I hit up the band. I was like, everybody send me like 5 songs that you were listening to around this time. So what's kind of fun is like, you don't really know who chose what.
Yeah,
but I love that. Yeah, it is kind of in like an order of like who, whatever.
Okay.
I have found myself in, I mean, also it's probably for people who found that playlist, like Hope's Fall is the only aggressive thing on that playlist.
It's right at the very end too.
At
so
the
it's
very
like
end,
the nice closer.
Right, especially because I think if I'm not mistaken, that is also the last song on that record. I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I was like, it's got this long outro. I'll just put that at the end.
You're a
you know?
playlist guy. I mean, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing.
You gotta be mindful. I, as someone who is in my very early 40s now, I found myself listening to less and less aggressive music. That doesn't mean that I'm above it, that anything like that. There's a place for it, and I will always appreciate it, and I'll always love it. There's always going to be new bands that excite me, etc. But for my own personal musical journey, I've been listening to just a lot of, especially around the time, kind of listen to like a lot of like Neil Young and the Rolling Stones and stuff that like
Nice.
really hits you when you're in your 40s, you know?
Yep.
I think I'm really just in hitting that spot. Obviously Leonard Cohen is always going to be there. I'm wearing a Replacements shirt. Always listening to the Replacements. These are all, you know, Nick Drake. These are all things, but you know, my contribution to that playlist included you know, like Galaxy 500, Sebado, Talking Heads, Massive Attack, like a lot of stuff like that. Also had been listening to a ton of Fiona Apple as well.
Yeah.
People, you know, I'm always a lyric first person, always, and a lot of people I mentioned are incredible lyricists, and I'm always taking things from them or like getting influenced by them, and so yeah, I think that's kind of where I was at for the most part.
I think one of the things that I've always appreciated about Touché is that even though you came up with a bunch of similar sounding bands in that kind of early, you know, late 2000s, early 2010s, you know, like wave of post-hardcore revival or whatever the critics wanted to call it at the time. What I've always appreciated about the band is that there's a really strong storytelling aspect to it. And, you know, you're a phenomenal lyricist. You always have a very clear kind of point of view and perspective, even if you might not think about it at the time. You know, that's how it comes across on the record. And for me, like, that's just emboldened by the fact that all of the people you just mentioned are incredible storytellers in their own right. And I feel like you're definitely taking inspiration from them and trying to find new ways to tell your own story. And, you know, as a fan, that's what I get about listening to your music. So I think that speaks
very
volumes.
kind.
Thank
That's
you.
very kind. I appreciate that. I really do.
You're very welcome. I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping things up here. So I guess my final question to you, what would be the one thing you want people to take away from listening to the new record? If you had like a pithy little statement, like what would you want people to leave the end of the record with in their brain?
I've sung a lot about grief in my career.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is that there are different types of grief, whether it's losing somebody who has passed away or losing someone in an emotional relationship sense. And one is not more important or impactful than the other. I think they're just varying degrees of that.
Yeah.
And doing whatever you can to honor those memories, to honor those people, regardless of circumstance. And that was kind of a big learning experience for me with this record. And I think that is a pretty universal thing to go through as well. So there's no grief that is more you know, there's no, how do I want to say this?
There's no hierarchy of grief.
There's no, thank you. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you. You said that so much more eloquently than I was able to say. But yes, exactly. There's no hierarchy of grief. Losing someone is losing someone. And honoring those people, again, regardless of circumstances, is highly important.
Yeah. Beautiful. I think that's the perfect sentiment to end on. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It is my honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Subscribe now to the Pitch of Discontent Patreon to receive access to extended cuts of our bonus episodes, as well as exclusive behind-the-scenes content, monthly Patreon-only episodes, member-only votes, the TPD community chat, and much more. Go now to patreon.com/tpdpod and join for as little as $5 a month. That link again is patreon.com/tpdpod. Thanks for watching the show.